Welcome to Live from the Lab, the podcast where we break down the science of training, performance, and a little bit of business. If you're an athlete, coach, someone who just works out, or entrepreneur looking for evidence-based, trustworthy insights to maximize your performance, strength, and success, you're in the right place. I'm Jason Gonzalez, a strength and performance coach with over 12 years of hands-on experience helping people of all ages level up. Each episode will dive into the latest research, proven strategies, and real-world applications to give you actionable takeaways that actually work. No gimmicks, no nonsense, just performance-driven knowledge straight from the lab. Let's get into it. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Live from the Lab. Today, we're going to talk about something that affects almost every soccer player. Could also be basketball players, could also be lacrosse players, could also be track and field, could also be any sport that has any sort of sprinting element. But specifically, we'll mainly talk about soccer because there's a study that I'll be referencing called "If You Want to Prevent Hamstring Injuries in Soccer, Run Fast," a narrative review about practical considerations of sprint training. It is by Pedro Gomez and Pedro E. Alcaraz. But again, even though the title is about soccer, it can apply to any sport that you sprint. So if you have ever known someone or ever experienced some of those annoying pulls or pain in the back of your leg, that could potentially be your hamstring. Your hamstring is located in the back of your leg. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So obviously in sports, speed is very important. And suffering from an injury, specifically hamstring, or any injury for that matter, could set you back weeks or even months. And it could be really kind of like sad or put you in a different mental state, but it's not good. So, like I was saying, speed is a big factor in all those sports. The faster you are, the better your chances of scoring, making a save, winning the game, making a basket, whatever that is. But here's something crazy about that, about how the title of the study. On the opposite end, running fast can also cause those hamstring injuries we're trying to avoid. And it seems like you're always in this never-ending cycle of, I'm sprinting fast, my hamstring hurts, I stop, I sprint again, there goes my hamstring. And on that note, a fun fact regarding injuries is the number one predictor of an injury is a previous injury. So if you have previously injured your hamstring, there's a high chance of re-injuring that same hamstring or ankle or wrist or shoulder, whatever that is. Now, hamstring injuries are super common in soccer. And to me, and from what I've seen, they seem to be happening more and more each year. The study references that the hamstring injuries make up almost a quarter of all injuries this is professional men's soccer. And a hamstring injury can keep a player out of the game on average of 90 days. That's 3 months of no soccer because you pull your hamstring. That could be up to a half a season. And that could be a negative thing for the player. And even though it's men's soccer, there's still relation to women's soccer and also non-professional men's soccer, but you'll get the idea. So how do you deal with these hamstring injuries? How do we get faster without getting hurt? Let's talk about it. To understand why these hamstring injuries happen, it's good to understand what sprinting actually does to your hamstring. When you sprint, your hamstring muscles activate in a specific way due to your actual sprint technique or you sprinting. And it's different from how they work during a regular hamstring exercise. So the hamstring exercises you do in the gym, while they might help, such as Nordic curls, RDLs, single leg hamstring slides, they might help, but to replicate the same type of force that you're getting while sprinting, you have to sprint. Think of it like this. Sprinting is like driving a race car on the track, and the exercises that you do in the gym are like driving a regular car. They both can involve driving, but the race car is going to put so much more stress on the engine. And this study specifically looked at the long head of the biceps femoris, which is a muscle in the hamstring, or BF, you might see it for short. And the biceps femoris works a lot harder when you're sprinting than when you're doing those hamstring exercises. And the faster you sprint, the harder that biceps femoris actually is working. And the reason that biceps femoris muscle works so hard is that it's trying to slow your leg down as it comes forward during the sprint. Right? So as you're sprinting, as you're striding, the biceps femoris slows down your leg as it comes forward, as your leg comes down, comes forward and down. And that movement can put a lot of stress on your muscle, which is why it often gets injured, and why you have to think about it like if you're overstriding your sprint, or if you're, basically overstriding your sprint, that biceps femoris is going to be placed at such a high stress, and then sometimes the capacity of that biceps femoris is not there, and something could happen. Now, while sprinting can cause those injuries, sprinting can also prevent those injuries, or I like to use the word reduce those injuries from happening. By sprinting and exposing your hamstrings to that stress, you can actually make them stronger and more resilient, right? That is how exercise works. That is how the sprinting works. That is why sprinting can actually cause, but also reduce the risk of injury. Now the dose makes the poison, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But sprinting correctly is also a big thing. If your running form is bad, sprinting can increase your risk of injury. Like I was saying, that overstriding could put that biceps femoris at a rapid pull or a length that it's not capable of being at, and then all of a sudden something happens. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, which I reference a lot. You have your porridge that is too cold, just right, and too hot. When sprinting, if you sprint too little, it won't protect you, but if you sprint too much, it can overload your hamstrings and actually cause an injury. So it's all about finding that porridge that is just right. According to the authors in the study, they talk about leg stiffness a lot. And leg stiffness, they find that it has been super important during sprinting. And specifically because it generates an increase in ground reaction forces, and through your leg, it'll actually help with the storage and return of elastic energy. So the stiffer your leg is making ground contact, it stores the energy, returns the energy of the elastic energy. It stores it and releases it more efficiently. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to, explain over audio, but like a recent video on my Instagram that I posted was sprinting fast is all about ground contact or mass specific force. So the harder you can push into the floor in a specific spot, the more it's going to project you forward. So that the leg stiffness is going to help with that. And in that study, the lower your leg stiffness is, it's been linked to inefficient storage and your running form, your movement efficiency. It's all associated with an increased load on that specific muscle or the hamstrings, which increases the risk of a hamstring injury. So I bet you're thinking, okay, how do we train in order to protect your hamstrings or build armor around those hamstrings? How do you get the benefits of sprinting without getting hurt? How do you find that porridge that is just right? Step 1, start slow. Do not jump straight into full speed sprints, especially if you haven't sprinted in a long time. You can gradually increase or progressively overload the amount of intensity, so the volume and the intensity of your sprint training, especially when you're starting new, like I said. Second thing is focus on your form. You could work with a coach to improve your running technique. You could even watch YouTube, but make sure, again, you're doing it the right way. Sometimes it helps to video yourself and then rewatch that video. But having good form and good technique will reduce the stress on your hamstrings and make you more efficient. Tip number three is you can mix it up. So instead of just running in a straight line, include some sprints where you curve, include some sprints where you change direction, include some sprints where you decelerate, and all of that different type and variation of movement will help your hamstrings adapt to the demand, especially, if you are a field athlete or a court athlete where you have to change direction and slow down. It's good to somewhat replicate that in your training. And the fourth thing is it's individualized. So everybody is different. Your sprint training should be tailored to you, not your, someone you play with, another teammate. That's the word I'm looking for. You are different than another teammate. So you could consider things like, what position do you play? What's your playing style? And what's your current level of fitness? It's also really important to track how much sprinting you're doing so you know how to progress accordingly or how to back off. You don't just want to look at your top speed, but you want to look at the volume. So looking at your top speed is going to be your intensity. You also want to look at the volume of your sprinting. How many sprints am I doing per week? If I'm sprinting 10 meters or 10 yards, how many of those 10-yard sprints am I doing weekly? And it shouldn't be, a set number of sprints. Like 20 sprints a week is going to be different for one teammate versus the other. So again, make it individualized. On that note, also, you want to be sprinting fast. So in this specific study, the 35 to 40% of the total sprints that you do should be faster than 85% of your max speed, and 15 to 20% should be faster than 95% of your max speed. So that's 60% of your sprinting should be 85% plus. The other 40%, if it's lighter, that's okay, but we want to make sure that you are sprinting near maximal speed. All right. I think that somewhat wraps it up. I guess one more thing to add is your sprint training is only going to be one piece of the puzzle. You need the strength training. You need to manage your overall workload and stress. So how much total training are you doing along with your sprinting? And then it's also important to address any individual weaknesses or imbalances that you might have. Again, not your teammate, but that you might have. Hamstring injuries and any injuries in general are a tough problem, but there are ways around it. There are ways to reduce it. There are ways to build your armor. Specifically with sprinting, understanding how sprinting affects your hamstrings is important. focusing on good technique is important. Focusing on training smart is important. And you'll be able to run faster, stay healthy, cut better, whatever that is in your sport, and perform at your best. Because the last thing I want for you and for you want, and what you want is an injury that's going to put you back. So that's all for today. We'll tune in next time. I'm not sure what the podcast episode next time is going to be about. I think it's going to be a Q&A, which I put out on the Instagram. We had a couple of good questions come through, so I am going to be excited to answer them. But if you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your teammates, share it with your coaches, share it with your parents, share it with anybody that you think needs to hear this. And if you also want to leave a review, that helps the podcast and helps exposure, which is awesome. And I appreciate that. But yeah, I hope this helped.